Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the third plenary session for today's conference. We'd like to commence this session by calling on stage our special guest, Professor M. Jahangir Alom, Treasurer of University of Dhaka. He's also a professor at the Department of Finance at University of Dhaka.
Honorable Pro-Vice Chancellor, Administration, University of Dhaka, Professor Saima Haq Vidisha, Honorable Deputy President, PKR, and Executive Chairperson, Polity, Malaysia, Ms. Nurul Isa Anwar, brothers and sisters and other guests, students, Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. We are celebrating July 2024 revolution. I was one of the, protesters and participants of this revolution from the beginning to the very end. And I went to Shahabag to express my solidarity with the students on the 2nd day of July. And from then to the end, I was part of them, and I was with them in the field. So whenever I go somewhere, I ask what were the reasons that motivated me to join this July revolution. I give two reasons. The first reason is that I had a fear that my beloved country might lose its sovereignty someday. The reasons that motivated me to have that fear were like we were having treaties with some neighboring country which went against the interests of Bangladesh. And the border killings, the way we were actually giving our infrastructure to that country without almost free of cost. And all of these activities actually went against the interests of our country. So I thought that this country might lose its sovereignty someday in the future. That fear worked in me. Second fear is that even if we, had survived sovereignty on papers, we might be a failing state or a failed state someday. Why? I'm sure all of you are actually familiar with a famous book titled Why Nations Fail, written by two famous professors, Professor Darren Acemoglu and James A. Robinson. So one from Harvard University and another one from Chicago University. They have mentioned that what are the reasons that work behind making a state fail. And all of the reasons that they mention in the book were actually were visible in Bangladesh. They started actually making a comparison between two cities, on each side of a border, American-Mexican border. And names of these two cities are Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora. Nogales, Arizona in the United States, Nogales, Sonora in Mexico. So by making comparison between these cities, they have identified that the institutions that actually require to make a state, a nation successful, and those institutions were not actually working in Mexico, and whereas the same institutions were fully working in the United States. And because of this reason, the quality of lives between these two countries, these cities, were actually huge. The quality of life of the people living in Mexico and the quality of life of the people living in the United States. So the institutions that are required to make a state successful, and those institutions were systematically damaged or destroyed by the fascist regime in the last 15 years. So I had this fear that my country might be a failed state in the future. So these two reasons, actually, one is that we might be losing our sovereignty, and we might be a failed state in the future. These two reasons actually motivated me to join this July revolution. So now question is that after, having these July revolutions and then having a new Bangladesh that we are calling, how can we actually achieve, our target of becoming a successful, a prosperous nation in the future? Okay, so I have identified 7 things that are important to make sure that this country doesn't fail, become a prosperous country in the future. The first one is that we must rebuild our institutions. Institutions like, law enforcing agencies, our judiciary, our bureaucracy, our election commission, our anti-corruption commission, our education system, our health system. This institution need to be rebuilt. This to be make sure that this institution work for the people, not only for a few individuals or a portion of the society in the country. We must free our institution from political control. We know that heavily our institutions are influenced by the political parties, and this needs to be ensured that these institutions are free from political interference. We must protect our rights of every citizen. The human rights and other rights should be protected of all the individuals in this country. And it needs to be shared that this country is free from gender discrimination, is free from religious discrimination, is free from other all sorts of discriminations. We must appoint people based on merit. The whole July revolution actually started from a protest against quota-based appointment system in the country. So under the quota system, some of the majority of the people are actually coming from the quota, and the whole thing, competition thing, was actually compromised. Less qualified people were getting appointment when the qualified people were denied the same jobs. It needs to be ensured that only qualified people are appointed and get employment. We must ensure that our elections are free and fair. In the last 50 years, we couldn't be able to, vote. We were not be able to elect our people whom we wanted to see in power. We were not given this opportunity, or we are not given this right. So we need to make sure that our elections are free and fair. We must fight corruption at every level. The corruption is huge. We know that due to corruption, the whole financial system actually collapsed in the country. And we have to actually rebuild our institution, and to rebuild this thing, to rebuild our institution, we make sure that our institutions are free from corruption. We must include people in the decision making. In the process of decision making, still in the country, our people, are not involved, are not getting involved in the decision-making process. If you look at the parliament, we saw that the majority people who got elected in the parliament were not the representative of the majority of the people. These people are coming from the elite class and business community. So they protected their interests. They didn't protect the interests of all the majority of the people in this country. So you need to make sure that through electing proper individuals to the parliament, we have to make sure that the people get the opportunities to participate in the decision-making process. So the point is that at the end of the day, what I would like to say that to have a discrimination-free and inclusive Bangladesh, we have to make sure that our institutions work, and we have to take all the necessary reforms to make sure that this institution work and the institutions survive. So I hope that we'll be able to achieve the points that I have already mentioned, and we'll see that our institution work in this country. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this conference. Thank you.
We sincerely appreciate your valuable insights. Now it's our time and our utmost honor to welcome our special guest, Noor Anwar. She's the Deputy President of the PKR Party in Malaysia. She currently serves as an Executive Chairperson of Polity from 2023 to 2024. She co-chaired the Secretariat of the Finance Advisory Panel at the Ministry of Finance, leading the research on revenue, debt, reform of government-linked companies.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you very much, pengurusi majlis. I know some of you speak bahasa, so you know when I say pengurusi, it means DMC. I would really like to thank all the Pro-Vice Chancellors, the Vice Chancellors, distinguished scholars, respected dignitaries, not just from Malaysia, but also actually from the ARC Party, the Yasin, as well as from the Chief Advisory's Office and University of Dhaka, because all of you here, if it's okay to call you my fellow comrades in solidarity and struggle, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam perjuangan, salam hormat. And I love that just now the word sovereignty was mentioned, because we in the global south must reaffirm our sovereign right to craft our destiny, inshallah. So it's a profound honor to receive this invitation. I'm Deputy President of the party, so I had to cancel a few meetings with the President, and I said, I'm very sorry, but today we choose Bangladesh because we want to celebrate this pivotal first international conference on the July Revolution. So it is such a historic moment. For every one person present, you have to make sure at least 50 others share in the spirit and camaraderie, because that's how you ensure movements last. And of course, we are here in honor of the heroes and heroines that we commemorate today. Now, this campus, not just, I think, the oldest here, much older than many campuses in Malaysia, steeped in the blood, sweat, and ideals of freedom, has once again emerged as a symbol of conscience and as well as renewed hope. Tagore once said, "He only has freedom who ideally loves freedom himself and is glad to extend it to others. He who cares to have slaves must chain himself to them. And he who builds walls to create exclusion for others builds walls across his own freedom. And he who distrusts freedom in others loses his moral right to it. And for every he, there is a she, because we are in this together." So I speak to you in reverence of a revolution that has shaken the soil of South Asia, the July Revolution of 2024. But I also speak to you as a fellow proud Asian, your Malaysian comrade, political activist, and on behalf of Malaysia's People's Justice Party. And I speak to you also in sadness, yet defiant and unshaken in recalling and harnessing the courage of your youth, the sufferings endured in voicing their longing for dignity, justice, and how today is part and parcel in living and building up to a nation's renewed promise. And unfortunately, the hard work begins. Comrades, we're also meeting at the back of so much global suffering, the enabling of the ongoing genocidal onslaught on Gaza by the hegemons, and their ilk remind us of the need. We need to strengthen solidarity and reaffirm our moral positioning and autonomy. Our thoughts also turn to the families affected by the tragic crash of the Bangladesh Air Force training jet into Milestone School and College on July 21st. And we make dua, Allahumma ighfir lahum warhamhum wa'afihi wa'fu anhum. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. So indeed, friends and comrades, we do live in such trying times. But instead of despair, it should embolden our collective resolve to chart a path forward in true sovereignty and solidarity. Now, I wanted to share the story of Malaysia's own student movement, but while recognizing the courage that is shown to the July Revolution. Students worldwide are often dismissed as apathetic, yet history reveals them as society's moral vanguard. A people's awakening in history of July teaches us that revolutions are never born in isolation. Pro-Vice-Chancellor spoke just now. They emerge from the deep fracture of injustice, the prolonged silence of the oppressed, and the collective hunger for dignity. It did not happen overnight. You saw the brutal clampdown on dissent, silencing of student leaders, manipulation of elections, and the erosion of trust in every institution that was meant to serve the people. So I really want to thank the University of Dhaka for shedding further light into the seeds of the revolution, and inshallah from the wonderful series of speakers, we get a sense of what is needed to move forward. Now, while each movement is unique in its own right, Malaysia had its own 1974 Baling protests, where student leaders, including Malaysia's current Prime Minister, led the movement for students in championing the plight of farmers against starvation in Kedah. Then this was in response to harrowing media reports of the people in Baling dying from starvation due to extreme poverty. A lot of them were detained for 22 months in draconian laws. But with sustained public pressure, you get the focus in rural development. So it's all about making sure there's balance. We're not just focused on the cities, right? Which is the focal point of the studies that Asamoglu in Why Nations Fail. But you kind of look into, it will take a different formula, a different set of priorities and development plan if you want to focus on the rural kampungs or villages, as they call in Malaysia. So your July Revolution reminds us stability without justice is fragile. And it was not just a protest, but it really became the avenue, rebirth of the nation's spirit, the rupture in the architecture of fear. And it's a reminder that at the end of the day, any regime, no matter how powerful, cannot stand against the will of an awakened people. So if I may, I wanted to share some of the suggestions based on our own humble experience. And remember, every nation will continue to go through its set of challenges. That's why the younger generation, the Gen Alphas, the Gen Zs here, it's really incumbent on you because it's going to be your future. It's going to be something that you have to embark on and you have to take up. And for me, some of the key steps moving forward should include economy empowerment. I wanted to draw attention to the lessons between Malaysia's Amanah Ikhtiar Malaysia, which is a microcredit program, and Grameen. Why? So Amanah Ikhtiar, which is Malaysia's largest microcredit organization, was set up 5 years after Grameen. And since 1987, we have disbursed 2.3 billion ringgit Malaysia to 262,000 borrowers with a 99.2% repayment rate, the world's highest. Alhamdulillah. So it's inspired by Prof. Yunus, but it's also crucial because every time we talk about FDI, every time we talk about economic development, about investing and getting billions, don't forget the billions here and the people here also need money immediately. So AIM's holistic impact showcases, and their target was women. So they empower female heads of households. And for me, of course, it's an important microcredit story. Now, coming back to the issue, the story from Dhaka to Kuala Lumpur, I then want to move on to share some of Malaysia's own experiences. I was surprised because some of the professors here were very well versed with the Reformasi movement. And you know, it's really interesting when it first was ignited in 1998 that the Sri Anwar Ibrahim's persecution transformed streets into classrooms of resistance. And we took over an existing political party, a multiracial party at the time by 1999, since the regime blocked the creation of new political parties on ideals mirroring your own July Revolution, free speech, institutional checks, electrical integrity, and economic justice for all. And as you can see, if you got some of you follow the Malaysian news online, the opposition just held a demonstration, most of them still wrangling with corruption charges, but much space was accorded without the water cannon for free speech. So in my lifetime at least, I saw a reversal from the earlier Mahathirist years of demonstrating to today. And it's important not for the political parties, it's important for Malaysians. And are all reforms done? Certainly not, because every generation will have to continue to struggle, and that is how life is led. We must appreciate history, we live in the present, and we remain fully committed, inshallah, towards building a better future. So 2 decades of endurance through detentions and defeats, because we lost many, many elections. I personally lost the 22 general elections. And then we came together in a federal coalition of political parties. But it also eventually culminated with the 2018 democratic transition. So for every revolution, you cannot expect one single moment defining history to be enough. It's horrible, but you know, it is and it will take a series of sacrifices, like-minded support, including the ability to harness existing strengths. So what do I mean with this? I mean coalition building with people you don't like. So I'm not talking about Bangladesh, I'm not touching your political arena, I'm talking about what we did in Malaysia. And we had, of course, a recent political turbulence, 3 prime ministers in 5 years, but it offers critical lessons. Because in the 2018 general elections, you saw leaders who collectively spent more than a decade in prison by their chosen de facto leader made that decision. Made that decision to prioritize nation over what was done to me. The torture, the oppression, the injustice. And of course, people will say, well, you still had to go through a series of betrayals. But then it helps you understand, once you overcome your ego for personal power, benefit, what have you, and you start practicing in your mind, in your deed, in your actions, the country means more. The country is more important. The general public and the masses, they don't have time for your personal issues. Then you get a healthier ecosystem, a healthier environment to ensure the best talents. And meritocracy alone is not enough. You must also have a means-tested program so that the most vulnerable, perhaps those stuck in lower income areas, not everyone will have access to the best universities, am I right? Some people would have parents in prison. Some people would have difficulty after intergenerational trauma. You must ensure there are sufficient robust safety nets to lift not just those who have access to the best that the world can offer, but those who need to at least have equal opportunity in doing so. Questions, inshallah. I mean, I have to thank my own reformasi journey because I grew up as a prefect. I grew up as a scouts. So you see only good people, good behavior around you. And then when my father was in prison, I went to prison to visit him, but I saw more than just the visits. I saw so many people from the lower income group. They didn't have enough money to pay for transportation so they can visit their loved one who is in prison. They don't have enough money to even pay for legal support. So that's why prison reform became one of the priorities when I was members of parliament, because it's not just about you. It's about your experiences and how you can try to tweak and improve the experiences of many others who remain voiceless. Now, the next question I want to ask all of you, as much as you want rights, freedom of speech, electoral sovereignty, I think we can't lose sight of economic sovereignty, because you also want to make sure whatever successes in terms of this new convivencia, this new ecosystem where political parties, where student movements, where activism can live side by side, succeed and is sustainable, is through economic sovereignty. Now, the question of how do we ensure our pension fund for Malaysia is the Employees Provident Fund. They are huge. They cover up to 60% of the workforce, and they provide for better days to come once you retire. So they then also help buy government debt to lessen high degree and percentage of foreign debt. And they remain Malaysia's most trusted institution to date. So the concern now is every single time we have engagements with them, how do you tackle the 40% in the informal sector? People talk about the gig economy. Inshallah, Malaysia by next month will introduce a new law governing the gig workers. Why is it important? When you're doing your work, if you meet with an accident, are you protected? What happens to your right? Not just the company's right to utilize your hours in a modern slavery-like system just to make things convenient for customers. Our PNB Sovereign Wealth Fund, using unit trust and nationalized plantations, you secure revenue from natural resources, is reinvested and enjoyed by the many, not the few, where farmers as well as planters hold equity. So I'm just saying to all of you, today, as you celebrate, the hard work remains, because even if you speak about your petroleum resources, how do you make sure that is downstream development capability? We've had experience, of course, with Petronas, and the issue is this should be harnessed. This is belonging to the people of Bangladesh, and you don't want, because you don't have the time to develop, you are at the mercy of big multinationals who sometimes or most times don't care about the plight of average Bangladeshis. So ladies and gentlemen, comrades, we move to the path forward. We honor the July Revolution sacrifices, and I hope that first we ground politics in principle where you can serve with justice, compassion, and integrity. And it's important also at the end of the day to work together. I see a lot of diaspora, Bangladeshi diaspora coming, and I think it's important. It requires, they call it takes a whole village, right? But it really does. For any movement to take place, there's so many complex problems in today's world. Take your pick. Issues of working conditions, issues of economic development. Is the FDI you're getting, is it fair and does it help local enterprises? Issues of efficiency, issues of fighting corruption. Corruption, my goodness, it's not just the politicians at fault. It's also the deep state. It's also the different layers of human beings who forget sometimes they should be human and caring, but care more about profit than sharing. And of course, as mentioned earlier, you leverage diversity. I think this is a bit more challenging in a world where everything's become an echo chamber. You just watch your social media, you only talk to the people like you. You hardly see things that you dislike. You hardly meet people who are different because that is the algorithm, again, set up by the powers that be. And this powers that be makes you question, are we really in control? And that's how regulations, control, and management of the usage of social media should take centerpiece in any government's minds. So I wanted to state that there is a rising generation across the global south wielding new ideas and unity against weapons to fight outdated systems. I'm asking, please let us share vision, prioritizing justice over profit, indigenous wisdom over foreign templates, and global solidarity over isolation. You must have a working industrial policy. I remember when Malaysia first came out with our own industrial policy, we were attacked by the West by not embracing the market economy enough. But everyone knows the weaknesses and failures of the market economy when it goes rampant, when it allows greed to go crazy just during the pandemic. I don't think we want to be like that. We want to make sure that we have enough degree of safety nets to provide for our people. Bangladesh's triumph today becomes Nigeria's blueprint tomorrow and Malaysia's imperative next. Our fates, inshallah, always intertwined in struggle and solidarity. I hope by exchanging knowledge and standing united in pain and victory, we redefine power for the marginalized. The July Revolution ignited a beacon of change, so we must continue to champion economic dignity, uphold student-led conscience, build coalitions anchored in sincerity, not expediency or reduced expediency, having a clear-cut sense of industrial policy, protect your sovereign wealth, and always be on the lookout for political and policy risks. May justice be your compass, courage your currency, and freedom your eternal flame. Inkilab Zindabad. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing such powerful words. Can we please request Professor Saimah Bidisha, the Acting Vice Chancellor and Pro-Vice Chancellor of University of Dhaka, to hand over an honorary crest to our esteemed special guest, Nurul Anwar.
Can you see? Oh, okay, nice.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now we have the honor to welcome on stage our special guest, Dr. Lutfi Siddiqui, Special Envoy on International Affairs to the Chief Advisor's Office, is also a visiting professor in practice at LSE Ideas, the foreign policy think tank of the London School of Economics. Can I please request Dr. Lutfi Siddiqui, sir, to come and say a few words?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I had no idea that I was going to be, I didn't have an invitation. I forced myself here because I wanted to listen to Nurul and the others, but thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Lutfi Siddiqui. I'm the Chief Advisor's Special Envoy on International Affairs, and hear me? Okay. It's exactly a year since the uprising, the revolution, the sacrifices that were made in order for us to be here today and contemplate the opportunity and the possibility of a new Bangladesh. It's still a possibility. We need to implement it amongst ourselves, all of us together. And this is the hard part. How do you execute? How do you implement? How do you deliver against the aspirations and against the full potential and the full possibilities that were opened up thanks to the enormous sacrifices of people through the uprising? I think of the concept of reforms. We have the Queen of Reformasi here with us today, and it's a concept that that we're all trying to adopt. And we were talking earlier on. I look at reforms as something we have to do at two levels. At one level, you have wholesale reforms. These are your commissions, electoral commission, the Parliamentary Reform Commission, Judicial Reform Commission, Public Administration Reform Commission, Police Reform Commission. All of those commissions are looking at things at a macro level, top down, and they are essential, they're necessary. They will make sure that never again will we have institutional assistance in the formation of autocrats. Never again should we have a situation where there is so much power concentrated on one individual that you have to hope and pray that that individual is not evil. So institutional design at a wholesale level is very important. And I think history will be kinder to us than perhaps we are being to ourselves at the moment when we look back and see how these reform commissions have been designed, organized, how the reports have come up, and how the consensus process is now being gone through at the moment. So that's one level, wholesale reform. But the other bit of reform that I look at every single day is what I call retail reform. These are changes in the way government functions that must be felt by the man or woman on the street, by individual citizens on a daily basis, in the day-to-day. How long does it take for me to get a visa? What are the processes like at customs? What if I want to set up a business? What if I want to change a detail on my birth certificate? Are these processes any easier, or are they more difficult than what they were before? What about land registration? What about the server that is magically out of order when I'm trying to register my trade union? These are retail level everyday services that we need to demand that have to be better than what they were before. You cannot have a revolution and then everyone pretends that we can continue doing work day to day in exactly the same way that we were doing before, while we wait for these big reform commissions to come up with their recommendations. So retail level reforms is important. What we're trying to do is make changes every day in the way that, for example, the Chittagong port functions, or the way we look at migrant workers and the way migrant workers are recruited and sent abroad and how they are dealt with and served by the embassies around the world. Because ultimately what you need is a democratic, continuous pressure for reforms. And that force needs to come from all of us as ordinary citizens. We need to get addicted to reforms. And our job in the remaining few months as the interim government is to create addiction towards reforms, for reforms, so that that power cannot be overturned by any future government as we go along. So my last point is, how can academia help? We are at a university, a foremost university, one of the most classical traditional universities in the world. How can students and academics help in that process? There is a very, almost a simple way in which I think all of us, those who are trained in analytical work, in data analysis and evidence gathering and research can help, which is to keep the focus on the data. We need to keep on asking, what do the numbers say? Not go with impression, but exact numbers. Statistics, evidence, data, and hold government accountable based on those. We will get some of the things right, we will get some of the things wrong, and then with accountability through feedback, we try again and we get more things right and fewer things wrong, and that is the theory of change, and that is how we move forward. So that to me is how we keep the revolution going. That's the way we should commemorate anniversaries every year. Is it telling me to shut up, or can I? Okay. I see. Okay. So, yeah, look, for me, any anniversary is only meaningful when we say we show respect and we remember with respect people who sacrifice so much. What does it actually mean? To me, respect is really provided through the way we work, the quality of our work. Every anniversary is the time when we look at the report card of how have we done things differently or better compared to this time last year, and how can we do even better and even better. So thank you very much for letting me be a part of this, and I wish all of you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you for your insightful words. It is now time to welcome onto stage Mr. Sharif Al-Banna, who is an honorable member of the Order of the British Empire, chairman of the Jagrana Foundation, and the president of the Sycamore Foundation for Global Leadership. His address is titled July Revolution, Building a New Bangladesh.
Should we start? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Parents of the July martyrs, distinguished guests, respected scholars, fellow citizens, members of the international community, and the courageous youth of Bangladesh, Assalamu alaikum. I stand before you today not only with gratitude for the honor of delivering a keynote address, but with the weight of an historic responsibility. We have gathered here today in Dhaka, in a city which hosts this university that has for generations stood at the crossroads of resistance and renewal to mark one of the most defining moments in our nation's recent history. Although I was born in Bangladesh, my childhood, my upbringing, my education, my working life has been abroad, namely the United Kingdom. My maternal grandfather, my Nana, was an Aligarh University alumni, and he traveled to the United Kingdom as an engineer working for the Royal Navy in the 1960s. I was taught Bangla language, history, culture, and whilst I had a psychological affinity to Bangladesh, I never imagined that one day I would be striving to work for a better future for my motherland, Bangladesh. The July Revolution of 2024 was not merely a political upheaval. It was a rupture in the moral and institutional fabric of a state that had over decades lost its way. It was the cry of a people who had been silenced, the uprising of youth who refused to inherit a future forged in fear, and the reawakening of a collective conscience that had been suffocated by impunity, authoritarianism, and deceit. When the first voices of dissent rang out from university campuses across Bangladesh, especially from this campus and the city streets, few could have predicted the scale of what was to come. On the surface, these protests were triggered by the quota movement, underpinned by widespread disillusionment over electoral manipulation, economic monopolization, media censorship, systematic human rights abuses. But beneath those grievances lay something much deeper, a betrayal of trust. The promise of an independent Bangladesh that had been desecrated by a political order that normalized corruption, dehumanized dissent, and weaponized the state against its own citizens. For 15 years, under the Awami League's increasingly autocratic rule, the institutions of our republic were hollowed out, eroded, leaving behind a democracy in name but not in substance. The July Revolution of 2024 was not born in a vacuum. It stands on the shoulders of our long legacy of resistance. It echoes the resolve of our liberation war in 1971, when ordinary men and women rose to defend their own dignity against overwhelming odds. It recalls the movement of 1990 that brought down another dictatorship and reminded us that democracy must be fought for anew in every generation. Each of these moments carried the spirit of defiance and renewal, and the July Revolution is the latest chapter in that unfinished struggle for a truly free Bangladesh. The events of August 2024, when over 1,500 citizens were killed and thousands were injured, constitute a national trauma that cannot be buried in the shallow grave of official denials. These were not accidents of chaos. These were acts of state-centered, state-directed violence. The revolution was paid for in blood, but it was not extinguished by violence. It was fortified by sacrifice. The courage of those whose bullets, with only banners in hands, who bore torture with dignity, who chose truth over survival, will remain etched in our national memory as long as this nation exists. Among us today are mothers who buried their sons before their time. We heard the pain, the aspiration, the supplication from the parents of Shaheed Jahiduzzaman Tanveen in the inaugural session earlier today. Among us are also students who carry the scars of police brutality, and fathers who still wait outside the prison gates, hoping that their disappeared children will return. Their grief is not just private sorrow, it is collective inheritance. It is the silent anthem of our revolution. And to them, to the fallen martyrs and the wounded survivors, I say this: your suffering has not been in vain. Your courage forever has changed the destiny of this nation. And yet memory alone is not enough. Mourning must give way to rebuilding. Revolution, if it is to matter, must evolve into reconstruction. Our responsibility now is not to only honor the martyrs of the July Revolution, but to actualize the democratic aspirations for which they gave their lives. The struggle for liberation is not merely about removing a regime. It is about reimagining the very architecture of governance, justice, and society. The task before is monumental. We must now envision and construct a new Bangladesh, one that is democratic not only in its institutions, but in its values, inclusive not only in rhetoric, but in practice, and not just only in law, but in lived reality. To begin, we must confront the question of political reform. Our democracy cannot be reduced to ritualistic elections held under the shadow of state coercion. We need a constitution that reflects the will of the people, not the whims of power. Electoral institutions must be restructured genuinely, independently, and be transparent and accountable. The judiciary must be liberated from the political interference, fortified with both ethical integrity and institutional strength. The police and the security apparatus, long used as tools of political persecution, must be reorientated to serve the people, not protect political dynasties. This is not merely a procedural reform, it is a moral imperative. Equally critical is the pursuit of justice for the victims of state violence. We must establish a Truth and Healing Commission that is independent, inclusive, and victim-centered. The crimes committed during the July uprising must be documented, investigated, prosecuted, not through the spirit of revenge, but through due process. Let us make it known that no future can be built on unacknowledged trauma. The survivors of torture, the mothers of the disappeared, the children of those killed, the victims of Ainagor must see justice served in their lifetimes. And let that justice be restorative, not performative, transformational, not transactional. I was recently at the 30th memorial of the Srebrenica genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where in July 1995, over 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and women were brutally slaughtered over a few days. And I witnessed the trauma of those mothers who 3 decades later were still discovering bodies and body parts of their loved ones and burying them. Closure is essential for all victims of injustice and oppression. Institutional reform must also extend to the media, education, and the economy. For too long, Bangladesh's mainstream media was not the fourth pillar of democracy, but the fourth column of authoritarianism. Journalism must be rescued from the corporate and state control and reinvigorated with the ethos of public service. Our universities must cease to be factories of political apparatus or conformity and become bastions of critical thought and inquiry. Education must be decolonized, democratized, and defended from ideological capture of any flavor or color. It is in the economic realm that the stranglehold of oligarchs and politically connected business elites that must be broken. Development cannot be measured only by GDP, especially when inequality deepens and public resources are siphoned abroad. We must reorientate our economy to serve the needs of the many, not the greed of the few. And dare I say it, but we also need religious reform of our discourse and our institutions. Bangladesh is a Muslim majority country with its history, culture, and traditions stemming from the Islamic faith. But we need to harmonize the vision, teachings, and the values of the Islamic faith with the ever-changing realities of the modern world. This is not compromising on principles, but revisiting the means. The articulation of the Islamic faith in public spaces need to capture both the hearts and minds of people. State coercion of both secular and religious values need to be challenged. Freedom of belief and religious practice itself is a cardinal Islamic principle. The Quran states that let there be no compulsion in faith. But beyond these structural imperatives, we must engage in deeper moral, ethical, and cultural introspection and renewal. Rebuilding Bangladesh is not simply about laws or infrastructure or reforms. It is about reimagining who we are and how we live together. The new Bangladesh we build is one, or we should build, we must build, is one where religious minorities are not viewed as minorities, but as fellow citizens, where rural communities are not abandoned, but invested in, where women do not face inequality, but lead at every level of society, where citizens do not face discrimination, but equal treatment in the eyes of law, where religious discourse and expression in the public space is not suppressed, but advanced to address modern challenges in pursuit of the common good, where ecological sustainability is not an afterthought, but a constitutional principle. In this new social contract, power must be earned, not inherited. Authority must be accountable, not absolute. Humans should be afforded dignity and respect, not based on gender, class, or religion, but simply because they are humans. As Qazi Nazrul Islam said, "Shobche boro porichoy ami manush." The greatest identity that I have is that I am a human being. And we must reckon with our place in the world out there. The July Revolution sends a message not only to Dhaka, but to Delhi, to Washington, to Beijing, and beyond. Bangladesh is not a playground for geopolitical calculations. We are a sovereign nation. We are a sovereign people. The days of foreign powers propping up autocrats in exchange for access and influence must end. Our revolution demands that international engagement with Bangladesh be based on dignity, not duplicity, on solidarity, not strategy. We welcome principled allies, not transactional brokers. We stand on the brink of ushering in a new era of reconfiguring our relationship with the rest of the world, especially our regional neighbors. The Jaagaran Foundation, which we established on the 6th of August 2024, within 24 hours of the downfall of the Hasina and her regime, stands committed to supporting this historic transition. We are not merely observers from the outside. We are conveners, researchers, advisors, and most importantly, citizens. We will continue to provide strategic policy guidance to these transitional authorities. We will work with survivors, scholars, students, and reform commissions. We will facilitate global solidarity grounded in Bangladeshi leadership and perspective. Our mission is simple but sacred: to ensure that the aspirations of the revolution are translated into institutions, policies, and culture. As I close, I want to speak directly to the youth of Bangladesh, the true authors of this revolution. You have changed the course of history. Do not let that fire be extinguished by fatigue or co-option. Guard your moral and ethical clarity. Defend your unity. Reject cynicism. The old order will try to reassert itself in new forms. Resist it. Learn from the lessons of the Arab Spring, which was expected to usher in a new era of freedom and democracy in the Middle East. I witnessed firsthand in Egypt and Tunisia both the spring and the counter-spring. This counter-revolution begins with factionalism and division. It shatters the unity of those who fought side by side to topple authoritarian and oppressive regimes. It then pitches one faction against the other, men against women, public university students against private university students, young against the old, rural laborers against the urban elite, secularists against Islamists. The promise of the July Revolution is not yet fulfilled. It is only the beginning. 50 years from now, when the children of this land read about July 2024 in their history book, let them say with pride, Our parents and our grandparents not only rose against tyranny, they built a just and humane nation from its ashes. Let them inherit a Bangladesh that is no longer oscillating between hope and despair, but stands as a beacon of courage, freedom, and compassion. Let us not settle for cosmetic change. Let us not be seduced by the language of stability. And in fact, what we need is transformation. May the memory of the martyrs inspire us. May the resilience of the survivors fortify us. And may our commitment to justice, democracy, and dignity lead us towards a truly new Bangladesh. Alija Izetbegović, the first president of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who led his country to liberation and freedom, reminds us all, when you go through it all and endure it, when you rise again after 100 stumbles, when you give up false hope and comfort and clench your teeth to openly face the truth, then you realize that the whole meaning of life is to fight evil. Thank you.
No video.
Thank you for the inspiring words, Sharif Lapanna. Now it's a pleasure and honor to introduce our next speaker for the session, Dr. Muhammad Saidul Islam, Associate Professor, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Here in Singapore, Dr. Islam will present a keynote titled Anatomy of the July Revolution, Roots of Rebellion, Dynamics of the Movement, and the Future of Bangladesh.
Okay, can I ask all of you to stand up for 10 seconds? I know it's a very good time to sleep. And it's just for a while, inshallah. With left and right. Okay, please sit down. Thank you. Young Barharmat Nurul Izzah Anwar, distinguished guests, colleagues, scholars, students, friends, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and a very good afternoon to all of you. It is a deep honor to stand here in front of you to reflect on a significant chapter in the political history of Bangladesh as well as of the world, the July Revolution 2024. What began as a student protest against a court rule eventually transformed into a generational uprising against authoritarianism. So today, I see some of the characters are broken, but it's fine. Okay. I think, is it okay if I use my own laptop? Because
Yeah, sure.
okay. So please excuse me, give me a second.
You know, connect it.
So the next one is good. The next slides are okay. The next slides are okay. Only one slide has issues, but next slides are okay.
এটা নেক্সট স্লাইডগুলো আসতেছে কিন্তু স্যার ভাই নেক্সট স্লাইডগুলো আসতেছে কিন্তু এই যে দেখেন অন্যগুলো ব্রোকেন হয়ে যায়
এটা আলাদা আছে।
তো এটা এইচডিএমআই কেবল চলে আসছে
Sorry. Okay, sorry for the mishap. Let me continue. Okay, so today I am going to walk through the anatomy of this revolt, its causes, its structures, its evolution, its central dynamics, as well as the future it promises. Just a bit of background about this movement. We all know that in recent years, the global South has become a hotbed of political uprising, from Arab Spring to Nigeria's EndSARS movement, to Bolivia's anti-capitalist struggle, to Sri Lanka's pro-democracy movement in 2022. Despite their differences, these movements have some common patterns. Deep repression, brave resistance, and power of digital tools to mobilize people. In July 2024, Bangladesh became part of this global wave with a historic revolution. Faced with brutal fascism, students here lead the most successful movement in the global history. Dhaka University, this university was basically the epicenter of this movement, where voices of the young people sparked a national call for justice, dignity, and freedom. The students led this movement in direct defiance of a brutal kleptocratic fascist regime. The fascism has several defining features. First, the state institutions like the police, judiciary, and bureaucracy were weaponized to intimidate dissenters as well as to manufacture false narratives. Second, much of the media and journalism become tools of the kleptocracy, spreading lies and glorifying authoritarian rulers through a dangerous personality cult. Something I call political totemism. Their duty was to challenge the power and the government, but instead they become co-opted and turn into enablers of kleptocratic fascism. Third, many intellectuals and members of the cultural elite choose sycophancy over integrity, trading truth for money, status, and proximity to power. And finally, the country's sovereignty was increasingly undermined by a clear and growing Indian hegemony. Against this backdrop of repression and betrayal, the students rose not just to protest, but to reclaim truth, dignity, and national independence. Over 3,000 years of Bengal's history, no regime has matched the sheer brutality and authoritarianism of Sheikh Hasina. While Bengal has experienced periods of foreign domination, colonial exploitation, political unrest, never before has the region witnessed such a systematic assault on democracy, civil liberties, and national sovereignty from within. Hasina's regime, as I will be elaborating after a little while, combined ruthless repression with mass surveillance, enforced disappearances, media censorship, and a kleptocratic grip over the state institutions, creating an unprecedented era of fear, propaganda, as well as control. It stands as the darkest chapter in the political history of Bangladesh and the broader global South. On August 5th, 2024, the impossible actually happened. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina fled the country, marking the collapse of one of the most entrenched autocratic regimes in the human history. Just a bit of my theoretical framework. I approach July Revolution through a blend of structural theories, political process models, post-colonial thought, subaltern studies, and digital activism. This synthesis allows us to understand not only the conditions of revolt, but also the timing, tactics, and trajectories of this movement. Methodology of data collection. The methodology of this study adopts a rigorous mixed method and multi-dimensional approach to comprehensively capture the depth and breadth of this particular movement. Institutional ethnography, 42 in-depth interviews, I also conduct 6 focus group discussions, had extensive archival research, media contents of over 100 programs and talk shows, first-hand field observations. I also had social media platforms that were used basically as a resistance archives, offering insights into digital mobilization and counter-narratives. So taken together, I tried to understand comprehensively the inner dynamics of the whole movement. Now, let me talk a bit about the cracks in the movement. I think most of the speakers today actually shed lights on this issue, but let me have some very specific data on that. We all know that between 2009 and 2024, Sheikh Hasina's regime systematically dismantled Bangladesh's parliamentary democracy, transforming into a kleptocratic and fascist state. The judiciary, the media, civil society were captured and weaponized to crush opposition voices, while the International Criminal Crimes Tribunal were politicized to target leaders from Jamaat Islam as well as Bangladesh Nationalist Party. The Digital Security Act became the blunt instrument of fear. Over 7,000 cases filed and nearly 22,000 people accused of merely expressing their dissent. Human rights violation reached staggering proportions. Bangladesh became a killing zone, with over 16,000 deaths in the last 5 years of Hasina regime. More than 3,700 extrajudicial killings and over 600 enforced disappearances. Aina Ghar remains a chilling symbol of unprecedented torture and sadistic pleasure taken by the oppressors. Barrister Arman, who is the hallmark of the operation of this regime, is also here today. Election held in 2014, 18, and 24 were nothing more than a political theater riddled with fraud and violence. Under Hasina's regime, corruption became systematic. Over 92,000 crore taka vanished in bank scams. More than 100,000 crores of taka was looted from the stock market, and over $19 billion was shipped off through inflated energy deals, including the notorious Adani contract. Between 2009 and 2023, Bangladesh lost a total of $234 billion. Money laundering surged with $8.27 billion lost annually through trade misinvoicing, while public debt ballooned to $100 billion, 4 times higher than 2009. There was also a huge amount of inequality. The top 5% hold 30% of the national income, while the bottom 5% survive on just 0.3%. The economic exploitation under the regime was devastating. Environmental degradation was rampant, with 132 illegal dredging sites and toxic air in Dhaka city, cutting the life expectancy by nearly 7 years. Alongside, Bangladesh's sovereignty was increasingly eroded through one-sided concession to India on trade, on security, and on water sharing, fueling deep national resentment and growing sense of betrayal among the people. So Hasina's regime, rooted in fear, repression, and unchecked power, ultimately became the architect of its own downfall. The scale of corruption and authoritarian abuse is so vast that volumes after volumes can be written on the kleptocracy and fascism it unleashed. This is just a short list of the irregularities. Now, let me talk a bit about the challenging despotism, the fight for justice and democracy. In analyzing the fall of fascism in Bangladesh, we can identify at least 4 distinct yet interconnected trajectories that shaped the collapse of Hasina regime. First, it was the long-standing resistance and sacrifice by ideological and organizational force such as Jamaat Islam, Islamic Chhatra Shibir, Hifazat-e-Islam, and segments of BNP, who since 2006 bore the brunt of repression, imprisonment, and extrajudicial violence while continuing to challenge the regime's legitimacy. Second, we witnessed also a kind of contrasting path, negotiation, collaboration, and eventual co-option by the sectors of the left, segments of the media, members of the so-called social samaj, corporate capitalists, Jatiya Party, and a fraction of BNP. These actors, through initially critical, gradually aligned themselves with the regime's authoritarian framework, diluting resistance in the name of pragmatism. Third, mass mobilization, such as road safety movement and quota reform movement, sparked the waves of popular resistance, particularly among the youth, students, and urban middle class, reviving civic energy and disrupting the culture of fear. And finally, the fourth and the most decisive trajectory was the mass uprising that culminated the fall of Hasina regime. This phase was actually characterized by strategic planning, underground organizing, and disciplined coordination. A generational awakened student as a catalyst of change. The July Revolution actually empowered a new generation of politically conscious, digitally savvy youth who become central to democratic resistance in Bangladesh. So the taxonomy here that I presented, for the sake of time, leadership and structure, it reveals actually the leadership and structure, and we know that there was no central leader, but there are some four-pronged leaders for this movement. Secondly, strategy and planning, events and momentums, symbolic acts of protest and multiple fronts, and final push. And eventually, Sheikh Hasina fled the nation. Just a bit on the contribution of Islamist struggle against the fascism. We all know that the Islamists have been at the forefront of this struggle against fascism in Bangladesh from the very beginning, both ideologically and in terms of sacrifice. In all 6 major massacres carried out under the Hasina regime, it was the Islamists, particularly Jamaat Islam, Islamic Sabta Shibir, Hefazat-e-Islam, and even members of the army during Pilkhana tragedy who paid the highest price. Hasina's crackdown consistently targeted Islamist voices, from Jamaat Shibir to madrasas to ulamas to broader anti-India Islamist public. Madrasa students not only participated in the resistance but also gave their lives, becoming martyrs in the fight for justice. Despotism strikes back. As the July Revolution gained unstoppable momentum, the Hasina regime eventually struck back with the true face of despotism, launching a coordinated crackdown to reassert control. And what we see is unimaginable. State violence escalated rapidly, abduction, torture, live ammunition become tool of fear, while even hospitals and universities were turned into war zones. On the street, the violence intensified. Lethal weapons were used against unarmed protesters. Even vehicles were misused to spread fear, and Bangladesh Chhatra League thugs brutally assaulted demonstrators, including women. In a shocking display of cruelty, Sheikh Hasina reportedly visited a hospital, spat on the injured, and ordered the hospital authority to deny treatment. A shameful and shocking act that exposed the regime's moral collapse. In short, the state's response was absolutely brutal, marked by massacres, widespread repression, and unimaginable violence, resulting over 1,400 deaths, more than 13,000 injuries, more than 11,000 detentions, and a horrific act against women and children that shocked the nation's conscience. Voices of the nation. At the heart of the July Revolution was not only just slogans and strategies, but also the deeply human stories that broke the nation's silence and stimulated conscience. A mother shattered by grief recalls how her only son, an innocent university student, was abducted after a protest and later found dead, his body bearing the mark of torture. A young woman beaten in the custody defiantly declared, "They tried to break my body, but they could not touch my conviction." Families were torn apart. Fathers served prison after prison for missing sons. Children fled homes under the cover of night to join the movement. And in this way, there are hundreds and thousands of stories in this particular movement. In exile, we also see Yet, among all these pains and tribulations, waves of solidarity emerged. Rickshaw pullers, shopkeepers, elderly freedom fighters, workers stood with the students. Even in the exile, the diaspora raised placards bearing the names of martyred, their voices trembling with sorrow and resolve. Now finally, a new dawn. The July Revolution marked not merely the fall of the regime, but also the rise of a new political consciousness, a collective awakening that shattered the architecture of fascism, called forth a new dawn for Bangladesh. I call it the third revolution, not second, following 1947 and 1971. The history does not write itself. Events only become history when we consciously document, interpret, and nurture them. For a transformative movement like July Revolution to be remembered with integrity, we must construct solid, evidence-based narratives, share them widely through credible books, peer-reviewed journal articles, media, and education. This is my last slide. So this new beginning demands more than cosmetic reforms. I'm glad that we have some government officials here. So what we need is actually the revolution calls for a bold dismantling of authoritarian institutions and reconstruction of democracy grounded in justice, transparency, and people's power. Second, we must challenge the personality cult, resist foreign hegemony, and restore historical memory as living contested truth. Third, liberation from kleptocracy is essential that paves the way for a justice-driven economy that serves the citizen, not the elites. Number four, political gangsterism or mastanocracy must be subverted in the new Bangladesh. Number five, our educational system must be decolonized. Number six, Islamophobia must be rooted out. And finally, but not the least, at the heart of this new dawn lies the renewed social contract, one that affirms equality, protects the vulnerable, and builds a new Bangladesh founded on dignity, compassion, and shared responsibility. The July Revolution was not a conclusion. It is basically opening gate of a new era. It shattered the architecture of fear and ignited a bold call to reimagine the very foundation of the Republic. The new dawn demands not just regime change, but a paradigm change. It is time to reclaim the state, rebuild institutions, rewave the social fabric, not as passive subject, but as conscious, courageous citizens, determined to shape a just and democratic future. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your contribution. Just an announcement that coffee break has been cancelled, but we will be trying to finish early, and we'll provide coffee in this arena here. Okay, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Yasin Aktay now, the Deputy Chairman of the AK Party, Republic of Turkey, and advisor to President Erdogan.
Somebody have left. I forgot.
Thank you so much. I didn't forget. Okay.
Present you the press at the last meeting. They want me to present the key first.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. Yes. Yes. Oh, it's back as well. That's it. Yeah.
By whom? These are mine. These are mine. Please. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear guests, or I checked my table. There are some stuff here left to clean the table first. And dear professors of Dhaka University or many other universities of Bangladesh, those pioneers and heroes of the July Revolution, which made us, when we sounded us very, very hopeful and inspiring events when we heard from Turkey. And I convey you, first of all, the greetings of your brothers from Turkey. They all say you, and I say you, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am really very happy to be here to address you and to be part of this celebration of the July Revolution after 1 year. And this, when we heard about this July Revolution, we were in the celebration of the 8th celebration of about the releasing or overcoming the coup attempts in Turkey. In Turkey, you know, we have a sort of chain of the coup d'etat attempts, or coup d'etat in general, the military rule and the despotic rule of some oligarchic groups who tried to blockade the popular will or to blockade the democracy in Turkey. Since that is the fate of all Muslim countries indeed after colonialism. It is the post-colonial character of our societies or nations in general. Because as you know, it is mine. Yeah. Okay. After, you know, I'm supposed to have a speech about to make some comparison between Turkey and to share my experiences in Turkey or in particular or in about the Arab Spring, the Arab revolutions which took place in 2011. And which was a sort of chain of democratization and seek for democracy in the Arab world. With the Arab world, the Arab people who are being suffering from colonialism, from direct or indirect colonialism in their countries, which is reflected upon them as a sort of tyranny, as a sort of dictatorships. Which was humiliating their own people, which was humiliating their nation, and so in 2010, indeed in 17 December, Abu Azizi in Tunisia, and he came and burned himself, protesting the dictatorship but not protesting dictatorship only, but he also protested the humiliation of one nation, of the people by their own rulers. And the rulers of the Arab society, which started from Tunisia to Egypt to Libya and to Yemen, and afterwards to Syria. And in Syria, of course, when it arrived in Syria, and another counter-revolutions had started. And these counter-revolutions, of course, there was another wave. The last wave was Turkey. There was target of these revolutions, counter-revolutions. Counter-revolutions means, of course, against revolutions. They are not revolutions. Indeed, they are not revolutions by their very nature. They were attempts to murder the democracies, to the revolutions, the will of the revolution from their own societies. And then when the last wave or the last target of these counter-revolution serial was Turkey. And they attempted in Turkey in the name of popular protest, for example, street protest, which is indeed a symbol of democracy. And its protests are always everywhere the symbol of democracy. People are walking to protest something, and that it is their very nature. By its very nature, it is their own right, very natural right of the people to protest something, to protest their ruler, to protest something. But they did it not against a tyranny, against a despot, against a dictator, but they did against an elected president or elected prime minister, elected government. When that was another track of coup d'etats. Coup d'etat, I mean, coup d'etat attempts, because when you try to say to use the streets, to use the instruments of democracy in order to revolt against democracy. That is very interesting conspiracy, and that is what happened in Turkey, and that is what happened against the revolutions, especially in Egypt. When in Egypt the revolution took place, and Mohamed Morsi, the first one who has been chosen in the history of Egypt, in the place of the pharaohs, he was the first one who was elected, and you know how he was revolted. The uprising against him took place on the name of more democracy, not on the name of, for example, he was, for example, corrupted. No, he was elected just 1 year ago, even less than 1 year ago, and those the counter-revolutionaries motivated people, and even they encouraged and motivated people to work against democracy indeed. And they revolted the democracy by the instruments of democracy. Of course, this was an excuse, and this was a pretext. And by this pretext, the coup d'etat, the military, came behind the protest, the democratic protesters. Indeed, those protesters were motivated by the military organs, by the non-democratic actors, indeed. And so there came another coup d'etat, and now those who are walking, those who came together, somebody, unfortunately, I was in Egypt at that time, and I was witnessing directly what was happening. And I interviewed with somebody who joined these uprising movements, street movements. They were saying that, oh, Mohamed Morsi came to power, but he didn't share the power. I say, why he should have to share the power? He was chosen. He was elected. He was elected. He has a 5-year term. You should wait. If you are not content with what he is doing, you have the chance to change him by election, by ballot boxes. But they thought that they will ask for more democracy, more participation, etc., and they joined the coup d'etat, conspiratorial coup d'etat attempt. And now, of course, they are really very, very upset about what happened. Then after a very, very, very short while, they were excluded from the process of coup d'etat, also from the new constitution of the new government. And now Egypt is in a dark situation. And I told all this in order to give you some examples about, because after a revolution is very, very important, but to keep and to maintain the revolution, I would like to thank Saidul Islam about his very good presentation. At the end, he showed us about how to protect, how to keep on this revolutionary line is very, very important, because you should be very, very awake about the conspiracies of the non-democratic powers when they come together in order to make some conspiracies against democracy on the name of democracy. Sometimes they come on the name of democracy. And one of the most important elements which may encourage or which may motivate is Islamophobic ideas. Islamophobic ideas may say in Egypt, for example, the liberals came together with the coup d'etat, with the anti-democratic elements or groups, because they were not content with the Islamists. They were complaining about the Islamists. They didn't like Islamists. They had some Islamophobic ideas about the Islamists, and they come, and what they did, they killed democracy, and they killed all the possibilities of democracy in their own country. That is very important to mention here, of course. So Turkey has suffered too much from the coup d'etats, and it is very interesting to mention that Turkey during the July Revolution also is the same history of Turkish resistance against the coup d'etat. The last resistance and the last victory, very big and very clear victory against the coup d'etat chain in Turkey. And in Turkey, you know, in 15 July, the people who tried to make a coup d'etat in Turkey, they failed because of the resistance of their people. And the people showed very heroic character and very heroic show to the against the coup d'etat, and we had about 250 martyrs, shaheed, inshallah, and more than 1,000 people were injured during this one night. But after all, we can see that we are proud of our democracy, because we became very proud of our nation, because it deserved. It is one of the few nations or few people who deserve democracy. They deserve the democracy because they defended their own government. That is very exceptional movement, social movement. Actually, we are usual in witnessing social movement are taking place to defend, to uprise against their government. But in the Turkish case, the Turkish people went to the streets to defend their government. That is really exceptional, and that means that there is a convergence between the nation and their government, between the nation and the state, and that is what is absent in our Muslim societies after colonialism. Even in the colonial age or after colonialism, in the post-colonial age, which came in the post-colonial age, there happened to be some dictatorships which played a role worse than the direct colonialism. They played as a sort of proxy of colonialism, not savor from colonialism, but a proxy of colonialism, and they protected the rights of the colonials after they left their countries. And there is always a difference, separation between the nations and their state, the people and their state. The state are not represent their people. That is our tragedy in our countries, in our world, in the Muslim world. The states are not being represented by their the people are not represented by their states. The states are something different. They are in other worlds, and they are imposing some dictatorships, some ideologies, another identity different than the cultural and historical identity of their people. That difference, and then that distance between the states and their society means that the states are the agents of colonialism in our countries. So these revolutions, especially the July revolution in Bangladesh, look at this, it is the same. Even though Mahmoud Rahmani in the morning said, yes, the revolution of Bangladesh is unique in many aspects. It's really unique. It is unique, but believe me, all the revolutions which is taking place, all the idea behind the revolutions in our societies is the same. They try to get independence from colonialism. That is why in Bangladesh, the July revolution doesn't represent appraisal against the Hasina only, or the Hasina dictatorship only, because just on the contrary, it also represents appraisal against colonialism of India, for example. the colonialism, direct colonialism or indirect colonialism of India. And all the coup d'etats, all these states who are far away from representing their own societies are representing the interest of some imperial powers. And that is why behind all these coup d'etats, there are some foreign interferers, there are some foreign actors, some other colonial regimes. And so when we see in Turkey also was the same, and this will to uprise against the coup d'etat, all the coup d'etats in Turkey which took place since the beginning were always interlinked with some countries, in either United Kingdom or sometimes United States. Recently, it was related with the United States, with NATO, and NATO was directly make an adjustment of the regime of Turkey by way of coup d'etat. So the coup d'etat attempts or the regime or the dictatorship in our countries never represent their own society. So revolutions against these dictators is also a seek for not only for democracy, but a seek for independence, a seek for dignity, a seek for bread, and a fight against corruption, which was called by Brother Saidul Islam as kleptomany. Just to mention, I don't know whether I have enough time, sufficient time, but I want to mention last interview with an U.S. ambassador or special envoy to Syria. He said he mentioned a very interesting point about Israel, and he said Israel doesn't want any strong country in the region. Look at this security conception of Israel, which was put by United States and by Europe in the middle or in the heart of Middle East, in the heart of the Muslim world, it puts by force. And now we usually hear something about Israel's right to defend itself. Israel has a right to survive. Israel has the right to defend itself. But this right, where this right is coming from? And if they have that right, but that right is on the expense of removing some people from their own land. For example, what we are witnessing in Gaza now is very, very tragic. Of course, people are being forced to die by starvation, and now the conception of the security conception of Israel is really very, very interesting, and it explains how democracy cannot or couldn't develop in our countries. And why it couldn't? Because the reason, we heard many things. We are all academics. We are all intellectuals. We joined several conferences which under the titles of us asking about the compatibility of democracy and Islam. Or Islam, does Islam and democracy are compatible? Are Islam and democracy compatible? Or Islamic values or Islamic principles are not compatible with democracy, so Muslim world cannot develop democratically, etc. And we heard many things about this. And we, as the Muslim intellectuals, usually find ourselves in a position of apologism and defending ourselves. No, Islam is very good. It's not as you think. It's very compatible with democracy. We think that they are very sincere, and really they want to ask about the compatibility of Islam and democracy. You know, Karl Popper, he has written a book about open society and its enemies. It's a very interesting book. And I ask about, I turned this title into the democratic society and its enemies in the Muslim world. Who are the enemies of democracy in the Muslim world? Is it Islam? No. Islam and democracy can be compatible. Islam can be compatible with monarchy, can be compatible with democracy also. That doesn't mean that the message or the mission of Muslims, the message of the Islamists is to bring democracy. No. But Islam and democracy has any elements that not to be compatible. But when we see any possibility of developing democracy in the Muslim world, we see behind that the coup d'etats or the counter-revolutions whose behind are some Western democracies. Western democracies are the enemies of the democracy in the Muslim world. And that is how we see not only Western democracies. Western democracies are the enemies of the development who hinder the development of democracy in our world. But they do it for many reasons. Of course, they don't want a successful Muslim democracy working. That we should be aware of this, and we should be careful, and we should be. Unfortunately, there are some monarchies in the Arab world who are not content with any possibility of democracy. But what the Tom Barak, I mean the special envoy of United States of Syria, was saying that Israel doesn't want any strong country in the region. Israel doesn't want any democratic Muslim country in the region, because democratic Muslim country means a sort of threat to Israel. And what is the evidence of this is when 1 year under the rule of Mohamed Morsi, Egypt was a potential threat to Israel. So they revolted it, and they made the coup d'etat, counter-revolution there, and they revolted it. And they try, Turkey is against Israel. It is against Israel because it is not content with with the occupation, and it is against occupation. It is against these massacres or genocide, and it is declaring everywhere, because Turkey is democracy. It is genuine democracy. The genuine democracy cannot be content with the very existence of Israel. So Israel tried to do its best to prevent the development of any democracy in our region. So they try to attack Syria. Syria is a new revolution, and I would like to thank really Bangladesh July revolution, because it triggered the revolutions, and it made almost 2024 like a new spring in the Muslim democracy, not to say Arab Spring, but to say the Muslim Spring. And when it started here, opened the way for democracy here, and we saw just at the end of the year, in two places there happened to be new really victorious step took forward in Muslim mode. One in Syria, it was really very, very strong and open and clear revolution. It was a sort of concours rather than revolution, and what Assad was representing the interest of Israel. He was not representing the interest of his own people at all. He was the reason for killing of at least 1 million people, and the location of displacement of at least 12 million people from there. And we saw coming to Syria and also Gaza. And when in Gaza in December 15 in 2024, it was the last victory, which Hamas, with very simple equipment, forced the superpower Israel plus America to ceasefire and made an agreement with it. Even though it didn't last, but it was very, very clear victory. And also I want to mention one more point, and at the end, we in Turkey, we always welcome the development of democracies in all region, in Muslim countries, especially in everywhere. And we are the target, we are destination for migration or for some asylums from despotic countries. We are, for example, we hosted from Syria about 5 million people. 5 million refugees came to Turkey, and Turkey, alhamdulillah, hosted them and tried to give them shelter, and it considered them with the naming and with the statement of Recep Tayyip Erdogan about them was as muhajir, not refugee. He said they are muhajir, and inshallah we will be an ansar. But I want to mention about any proliferation of the resource countries as refugees in Turkey or as muhajir in Turkey. We've received, for example, from Egypt, from Iraq, from Libya, from Yemen, from Syria, from Sudan, from Tunis. All these countries were despotic countries, but alhamdulillah we didn't receive from Pakistan, from Malaysia, from Indonesia, those countries where democracy is working in this or another way, and there are no any Islamophobic developments or feelings there. I say this all, and I would like to thank you again for listening, and I am really very happy and congratulate our brothers for their very big victorious revolution. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Madam,
Thank you so much, sir. Now, can I please call on to the stage our session chair, Professor Saima Haq Bidisha, Acting Vice Chancellor of Dhaka University.
Professor Dr. Yasin Akhte, Deputy Chairman AK Party, Professor M. Jahangir Alam Chaudhary, Honorable Treasurer, Dhaka University, Mr. Sharif Banna, Chairman of Jagaran Foundation, Dr. Saidul Islam, Associate Professor of Nanyang Technological University at Singapore. I know that we have with us M. Kabirul Islam, Secretary of Ministry of Education, and we also have with us many special dignitaries and distinguished speakers. Very good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here because at Dhaka University, we always welcome interaction between academia from different parts of the world. And as part of that, this initiative, first of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers for organizing this event. And as far as I know that there have been 4 plenary sessions, and there are around 450 research work that has been submitted, and many of the research papers, around 100 of research papers are from foreign nationals. So I think it's an excellent opportunities to collaborate between the researchers who are actually working on July Revolution or different areas of political economy and different parts of the world. And I think in these in the last 6 hours or 10 hours, you have been able to hear from special dignitaries, and that has actually provided us with inputs, food for thought about the social, economic, political, cultural, and different aspects of July Revolution. And we all know that one of the important strengths of these July uprising or July revolution was the participation of people from all parts of the world, all walks of Bangladesh. And we have seen that especially the participation of youth, that was one of the very striking feature of these, what we have seen in July 2024, and especially also the participation of young minds and participation of women. That was very important, and we have seen that people, even a mother, she came with water. Even some people came with rickshaw puller, came to help those who were injured. So we have seen people have come from all walks of life. They have come and they participated, and that was the strength and that was the beauty of this revolution. Now, from that point of view, we are actually at Dhaka University, and we know that in Bangladesh as well, the government is actually organizing different programs and different academic program, different cultural program, different discussion, and different ways to express, to pay homage and to pay respect to the martyrs of July Revolution. So at this point, I also would like to express my gratitude, my respect, and to pay homage to those who have sacrificed their lives and who were injured during July uprising, and would like to say that may Allah grant them Jannah. Now, from when we are talking about July Revolution, there are different aspects we should keep in mind. One is important when now it's 1 year has already passed. So one important, very important thing is like we need to do different programs like this formal program, because these are a way to acknowledge, to respect, to pay homage to those who were engaged in this July revolution. And that is a very important way, because we also need to have academic discussion, we need to share our thoughts, to share our beliefs, and to discuss among ourselves how we should move forward. The secondly, I think very important thing, we should stand beside those who were injured during the July uprising, and we have seen those who were injured and the families who have been affected. It is extremely important that we actually stand beside them and help them and to incorporate them in our different programs, different functions, and different activities. Thirdly, the academic discourse that we have been talking, and the academic discussion, which is extremely important. And from that point of view, this type of conference is very important, because we need to analyze, we need to share thoughts among countries who has gone through similar or some other type of revolution, uprising, and we need to know from each other. And by knowing from each other, we will be able to move forward in a much better way, in a much in a way which is more inclusive in the context of Bangladesh. Fourth thing is what I like to mention is like very important thing when we are thinking about July 2024 is people wanted to see changes. People wanted to see changes, and people wanted to build a new Bangladesh. And in order to do that, there are a lot of issues that needs to be discussed. And I'm sure in the morning session and in the afternoon session, many of the aspects have been discussed. So, and there are so many aspects, it's not possible for me to cover all of the aspects. But one or two important things I would like to mention. One important thing that has already been pointed out by our Honorable Treasurer, that is, it's extremely important to rebuild the institutions. our social, economic, cultural, and administrative institution, these institutions have serious problems and serious irregularities. And that is extremely important if we want to rebuild the Bangladesh, if we want to move forward. Then it's extremely important that we actually look at the deficiencies that these institutions had and how to move forward. And for that, a lot of initiatives have been taken for reform, and that is a very positive issue. And we are hopeful that through this reform we will be able to see a better Bangladesh. Another thing, I would like to mention that because my subject is economics and I work on labor market, and so I have a keen interest to work on the youth in particular and youth employment. And I think this time this is a unique opportunity that Bangladesh have to utilize the youth power of Bangladesh. And if we think about the context of Dhaka University, in Dhaka University we are we have the privilege to mentor and to educate the very meritorious students of Bangladesh. And from that point of view, I think it's extremely crucial that we endow the students, the young minds with different skill, with different educational facilities, so that they can actually explore and perform to their best. Because we know that the world is changing, because with the world is changing, and if we look at the global phenomena, that there are advanced technologies, advanced research, advanced communication. So if we look at all of these things, it's extremely important that our youth are meritorious, but we need to provide them facilities so that they can explore and they can utilize their merit. And from that point of view, at Dhaka University, we are trying to provide better facilities for the students through different initiatives. And we are actually trying to collaborate with the private sector, to the industry, and to have a bridge between the industry and academia. And also we are trying to collaborate with different countries and different educational institutions of different countries. Like, we can collaborate with different institutions, education institution of Malaysia, Turkey, and there are some initiatives have been already going on to collaborate with institutions of China, Japan. So in this way, it is possible to explore the potentials and to harness the potentials of our youth power. And that is, I think, one of the very important thing, because we know that as in this July Revolution, the youth played a very crucial role in order to respect their talent, and by providing them with different facilities that they want, it is possible to sort of show the respect that they deserve. And from that point of view, what I think that if we can really endow and empower our youth and mobilize the youth in a very proactive, innovative, and advanced way, with the knowledge, with the skill, with different educational equipments, then it is possible that we can actually, inshallah, build that Bangladesh, the Bangladesh that we are actually dreaming of, a new Bangladesh, the Bangladesh which is an inclusive Bangladesh, discrimination-free Bangladesh. And we hope that through this conference, we will be able to accumulate ideas, thoughts, and share our views towards that end. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your words.
Thank you. Next one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your words. With that, it is with our utmost pleasure that we welcome our next keynote speaker, Dr. Usama Al-Azami, an assistant professor of Islamic Studies at the College of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University, Qatar. He previously was a departmental lecturer in contemporary Islamic Studies at the University of Oxford. He will deliver a keynote titled Islamism After the July Uprising, Rethinking Secular Liberalism in the Post-Revolutionary Moment.
Yes.
This
is good now. This is good.
معاوز النتيجة مستخدمة It's a great honor. It's a pleasure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'd like to start by thanking the organizers. It's a great honor and a great privilege to be here. My grandfather, rahmatullahi alayhi, was the General Secretary of the Union. I cannot remember in which year. And so it is an honor to be at the Oxford of the East. I had the privilege of studying at the Oxford of the West. And so with that, I want to speak maybe about a subject which is a little philosophical for the afternoon. I have a presentation entitled Islamism After the July Uprising, or Islam After the July Uprising. The subtitle being Rethinking Secular Liberalism in the Post-Revolutionary moment. I've described this as a post-revolutionary moment with a hint of pessimism because I'm a student of the Arab Spring. I've written a book about the Arab Spring, which I will refer to. You will forgive me for doing so. The Arab Spring took place in 2011 and was reversed by 2013 in a very severe counter-revolution which cost the lives of many. Of course, there have been some victories, very limited number. Perhaps Syria is the only example, but in almost every other case, there have been attempts by established regimes to crush the existing attempts at revolution. With that, I want to reflect on a few concepts that are pertinent to our thinking about Islam or Islamism after the July Revolution of 2024 in Bangladesh. And I'm using two terms, Islam and Islamism. Islam and Islam Pantha in Bangla. Islam is a recognized category. Islam is a religion that was brought by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about 1400 years ago. Islamism is a term that we use today, and I use it to refer specifically to the political dimension of Islam. Islam is a religion which is a holistic, comprehensive vision of what a Muslim should be. This is a very distinctive conception of religion when it comes to the way in which the word is used in the English language. And so Islam has a political dimension, and it's useful to have a word to talk about that in the English language. And so we use the term Islamism. Islamism is thus the political dimension, as I'm saying, for the purpose of this lecture. However, I am arguing that Islamism is not distinct from Islam. Islamism is not separate from Islam. I have a book on the screen by an author called Melis Ruthven. Melis Ruthven is a scholar once based at Cambridge University. He has published, for many years, he's published a book called Islam, A Very Short Introduction by Oxford University Press, part of the Oxford University Press Very Short Introduction series. In it, he has a line where he says, Islamism is not Islam. Islamism is an ideologization. This is not an exact quote. Certainly, the quote is, he says, Islamism is not Islam. So he's making a very clear and, as far as he's claiming, factual statement in a Western introduction to Islam published by one of the most prestigious presses in the Western world, academic presses in the Western world. And he's making a straightforward claim, Islamism is not Islam. And what these scholars do by making these sorts of statements, which are read by Muslims in the Muslim world and sometimes naively adopted as their own understanding of what Islam is, and we learn from a white colonial Westerner what is Islam, and then we start to say, oh, actually, Islam is not supposed to have a political dimension. These are the sorts of threats that occur when we do not have an intellectual grounding in our own tradition, in our own understanding of Islam. So, as I say here, Islamism is not distinct from Islam, as some secularists claim. Rather, it is a dimension of Islam. So, the political dimension of Islam will be the concern of certain people in the community. It may not be the concern of every single person. Your grandmother in perhaps your village doesn't need to be concerned about the political dimension of Islam. She just needs to be concerned about praying 5 times a day, fasting in Ramadan. But some people need to be concerned about the political dimension of Islam. Otherwise, Islam cannot be holistically practiced by our community, because Islam is a communal religion as well as an individual religion. This is where I wish to invoke a scholar who has become a fascinating lightning rod in post-revolutionary Bangladesh for a reason which really escapes me, but is partly because I think people don't understand scholars that they read from the West very often, and they misread them and try to exploit them for purposes of their own, for agendas of their own. Talal Asad is the son of Muhammad Asad, famously. He's a saying the misunderstanding of Sharia is that people reject Sharia. They don't recognize there's a rich tradition of governance in Islam. Those traditions of governance were valid in nation state itself needs to be regulated in light of grounded in Islam. I want to ask if you recognize the picture on the top of the screen. This is a question for the young people. This is a genuine question for young people. What's the picture on the top of the screen? Yes, certain aspects of culture have maybe certain question marks around them. Yesterday, someone was saying yesterday, you know, music. Someone was talking about music. You know, what will Muslims, if Islamic-minded people get into power, what will they do about music? I'm still asking the question, by the way. Anyone know what the picture is on the top of the screen? It's Wakanda. Okay. Hussein and okay. We'll get back to Wakanda in a moment. Someone was asking me about music. What's the Islamic opinion on music? If we study our tradition, and we have the translate from the great country of Turkey, which is one of the musical epicenters of Muslim world, has been for centuries. And it's actually been linked very often to Islamic tradition.